and putting color into the building to make it a little cozy in here so that when it's pictures, you can almost start marble everywhere. So, why don't we get down and show you the fanciest room in the building, and then we'll get started. Well, down the fence end, because the older ones from before the 18th century. These are all former governors. We have a portrait of every single former governor. We basically went there, sort of offices down and taken ours to get their portrait taken. We brought up rooms on the floor, while our modern governors are on the floor down. But they started out in our second governor, reception room, as our first governor, So here we have the governor's reception room. Now I look for them, we're doing Pat Gilbert wanted this room to be white. That way the paintings on the walls at the top. But he took a trip to Europe, awesome houses and castles, and decided we needed our own fancy European drawing room. He came back and this was the result. This is one of the changes he made. And reflect that. So, as we move through the building, I want to you see a lot of symbols of Minnesota, things like our stars all over the building. Our state motto is not what you see on our license plate. It is not land of 10,000 lakes. It is actually the Croix du Nord, the North Star. We are the North Star State. So there are stars, there's the ones on the floor, the ones around the top of the room. There are agricultural products. We have corn and wheat. And we have different types of flowers. These are lady slippers, all over nuts. Lady slippers are our state flower. There are booms throughout the building. There are M's. It's kind of like finding the families and Mickeys at Disney World. Finding all these little symbols. And they're just worked into a lot of the artwork that's throughout the building. I do want to put in, so of the 6 paintings in here, Pat Gilbert did have one thing that he asked of the artist. Because it was the Civil War veterans pushing to get this building built, he knew that a lot of the paintings and a lot of the other artwork was going to end up having some sort of, there was going to be Civil War flavor to it. If you walk our Capitol Mall, you will notice that there are no Civil War monuments, because this whole building was considered a monument to the Civil War veterans. So he did ask the painters that he chose to paint the paintings, but this was not all be thousands. So he got half and half. 3 of them that are not thousands. We have, at this end of the room, we have Father Jonathan being the Falls of St. Anthony. That's in downtown Minneapolis. In case you haven't been there, it looks nothing like that. Now it's all been dammed up and they used it to run business. Across the room, we have the Treaty of Traverse-des-Sioux. In 1851, 2 treaties, the Treaty of Traverse-des-Sioux and the Treaty of Minnesota, were signed. And basically, that's what gave us all the land that we now know in Minnesota. The last one that is on national battle scene is Minnesota Fourth entered Vicksburg. Even though we were the youngest state and the smallest state by population when the Civil War started, we sent a lot of troops back east into the south to fight the Civil War. The Minnesota Fourth was at Vicksburg, and we were one of the first units to enter the city after the siege was finished, after the siege ended. Across the room from that, we have over here the Battle of Nashville. Behind me, we have the Battle of Mission Ridge. And the last one we have is the Battle of Gettysburg. Now the guy at Gettysburg, that it depicts the Minnesota First charge at Gettysburg on the second day. And I think that's the return. I thought I got rid of them before the return, but I guess not. The Minnesota First, the first regiment of volunteers from Minnesota to go back to the fight. Our governor at the time, Alexander Hamilton, happened to be in Washington, D.C. at the time that the Civil War broke out. He went to Secretary of War Stanton and said, I sent 1,000 troops from Minnesota. This right put it in writing, so they did. Took it to Lincoln, Lincoln signed off on it. Ramsey wired back here to Minnesota and said, this is what happened, start calling for troops. By the time Ramsey returned to Minnesota, we had 2,000 troops that had volunteered, so we had 2 regiments ready to go. At the Battle of Gettysburg, the Minnesota First, they were decimated. They lost almost 80% of the troops in their unit. There's a big monument to the Minnesota First at Gettysburg, so if you ever get out there to the battlefield, you'll have to find that monument. They were asked on the second day of the battle to hold back a Confederate charge near Cemetery Ridge, I want to say. It's been a while since I read it. And basically, they were able to hold back the charge while reinforcements were brought up from the rear, but by the end of their battle, they lost most of their men. After the Battle of Gettysburg, they actually had to be, they could no longer be an infantry unit. They actually were reformed into an artillery unit because they no longer had enough time to be an infantry unit. Welcome. Thank you. Questions about this room? This is the governor's perception. Now, how many actually live in Minnesota? Well, that's the bigger majority than I normally did. Normally we saw people from out of the state on the weekend. This is where the governor holds all his press conferences. So if you're watching the evening news and they hold a press conference and it's actually the governor speaking, unless he's holding it somewhere away from the Capitol, it happens in this room. The fireplace probably looks rather familiar.
Do they still use this room?
They do. It's used a lot for cabinet meetings and for committee meetings if the governor actually wants to sit in on committee meetings. When we had a lot of flooding earlier this year, especially earlier this fall. So the governor was meeting with a lot of FEMA people in here. There were committees and some of the authority leaders, and all of them were meeting in this room because it was this room that they put them all. What we were planning was to be done to help those that were affected by the flooding.
And who painted all these?
Different people. The city of Traverse Sioux and the Minnesota Fort, Vicksburg, or the only two in here that were painted by the same person. They were all painted by Francis Millette, and he was actually rather well known for his paintings of historical events. But the other thing he's known for is going around the Titanic. The only one I know a lot about is the Battle of Nashville painting. The gentleman who painted that one, Howard Pyle, was actually raised Quaker, so raised to be a pacifist. So he felt a little odd painting the battle scene. So he said, well, I'm not going to make it your stereotypical rah-rah, go war type of thing. So fine, paint it the way you want to paint it. And a lot of people called it raw. A lot of the veterans, that when they held the grand opening of this building and they walked through here and saw the painting, they said they could smell the smoke. So it's a little bit more realistic than your typical painting from this time period.